Hello, my friends. Have you ever had the experience where you plan to do one thing and then do something completely different? That is exactly what happened today when we had planned to record this podcast. My guest and I had planned to talk about one thing and then went in a completely different direction, which is okay because I think that the conversation we had is actually the one that you need to hear. My guest today is Dr. Karen Schiltz. She's a California licensed clinical psychologist with a private practice in clinical and forensic pediatric and young adult neuropsychology at Golden State Neuropsychology. Dr. Schiltz holds a volunteer position as clinical professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Biobehavioral Sciences at the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. She is also the co-author of the book, Beyond the Label, A Guide to Unlocking a Child's Educational Potential. I am so glad that she is here to have a conversation with me today, a very important conversation. So listen in as we talk about supporting your child's mental health.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Hi, Karen. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking.
This is a first for me. This is the first time I'm actually interviewing one of my former instructors and mentors. So this is exciting for me.
Oh, that's so great. Well, I want to thank you for really being the mastermind of integrating our community of parents and providers. It's quite wonderful, especially during these challenging times, for us to connect with one another.
Absolutely. And I think that, we're both neuropsychologists, and I think we both see it as an honor when parents meet with us to share their concerns about their kids and the struggles that they've been experiencing. And, oftentimes we're looking to uncover any neurodevelopmental challenges that impact a child's life, but this is such a different time. And we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and the difficulties are so much more complex, wouldn't you say?
Oh, and there's so many layers. Isn't there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think in times of pandemic, and we've had this discussion before, that there's an increase in the risk of PTSD and depression and anxiety. And can you talk about how children and adolescents are being impacted right now by what's happening?
Absolutely. And, there is, from what we know so far in the research, there has been an increase in depression, anxiety, decreased life satisfaction. And, there's this other stuff that we need to look at is the child's sleep. Are they settling down to sleep? Are they able to keep sleeping through the night, right? And also their nutrition. Kids are eating more.
They are. And not exercising enough.
And I don't know. When the gyms closed down, thank goodness we are very fortunate in California to be able to exercise outside. It's been wonderful to have that available to us. It's not 40 below zero for us. So kids can get out, but we know that kids are not. And they've really dropped exercise. Most of the kids that I've seen since March are not exercising. They're on social media. And what we've definitely found out is that teenagers, whether they have difficulties or not mentally, and are learning challenges, they're spending more time on media. So there's good things and bad things about media, right? During this pandemic, we know that kids have a social craving. They've had a social craving during lockdown. And now the world is opening up a little bit more in California and in other states. That's happening. And play dates and get-togethers are now occurring outside a lot more frequently with social distancing observed. But, what I've really seen and what the research has indicated is kids have been so impacted by not having the opportunity to see their friends and being zoomed in on Zoom or whatever remote platform they're using and learning and conversing with their friends. There is this craving. And we know in the research that it's not really the virus that so much the kids are worried about. It's that they don't have the opportunity to see their friends. And we like to touch people, right? We like hugs. And I don't know about you, but last March and April, when that was cut off from me, there was such a longing that I had.
Right.
It's like I'm kind of a hugger, and I couldn't do that anymore. And I had to stop myself. Like I have to wave or have to make what we call the heart, in space. And it was really hard. And many of my friends and colleagues I've talked to, they really didn't think about that before.
I know. And that connection is so much a part of our well-being, and that physical touch actually has a neurochemical, reaction inside us that contributes to that connection and actually relieves some stress that people experience. And it's directly related to what you said before about the increase in depression and anxiety. That loneliness has a direct impact on those emotional states.
Yeah, it's really something when you think about of the profound impact on adults, the elderly, and youth. And, we're social beings, and that was cut off for so long. And that was a real driver, in my opinion, for stress, depression, anxiety, difficulties just with exercise and sleep. These kids that I've seen, many of them ruminate at night, and they still do. So all of this has worked together to create an unstable environment. And, we all like consistency and predictability, right? We're social creatures, but we like that consistency. And all of a sudden that was taken away from everybody when you think about it. The virus, we didn't know anything about it last spring. We were flying by the seat of our pants, basically, right? Like daily news reports. And just think these kids were taking that in, plus dealing with their parents' angst and anxiety. So kids rely on consistency, predictability. This creates security for them and their brain health. And all of a sudden, so many people were worried. And many of my children that have come in talked about that. And, I had one little boy, I'll never forget him, 6 years old. He came in, and it was in June. And he had symptoms, behaviors consistent for post-traumatic stress disorder. So what I found in youth that have come in to see me, and I'm a pediatric neuropsychologist like you, is over half of the kids that I've seen have behaviors consistent for post-traumatic stress disorder. And this little boy framed it as this, and I'll never forget this. It was quite profound. He said to me, "Dr. Karen, I think the virus is a bully. And I don't like bullies. And I think there are other bullies out there. And I don't know what to do." So when you think of a 6-year-old saying that was through his perspective, his lens. How profound that was, that he, basically framed the virus as a bully.
Right.
It was quite profound. And he was quite lost and quite confused and sad. And by the way, he was cut off from his friends, because at that point, we were in the height, when you think about it, in the country, And we knew, I remember in March, there were some colleagues of mine that said, oh, you know what, this will just last a month or two. I bet everything will be fine. But come summer, it wasn't fine. It wasn't at all fine. And that's when this little boy came in. And, just think of his stress and frustration and being cut off from his friends. He's very social, just completely beside himself. And one of the things I noted with the parents is they were loving and supportive, but there were problems with the internet. And this is one of the things we've known through the research. The kids have been most distressed by problems with technology during their remote learning. Okay, with this little boy, his access to solid Wi-Fi was not there, right? His mom wasn't versed, was not an IT expert. Okay. And granted, in kindergarten, they don't have that much remote learning to do, but he was quite distressed by that. When he would do his games on computer, Mario, even on the Switch, Roblox and Minecraft, they weren't going very well. So even his entertainment was being affected by unstable Wi-Fi. And this bothered him. And, I use that case because research has really indicated there were a number of articles that came out in 2020 that, some kids, yes, are worried with the virus, but the more primary worry, the concern through a child's eyes and teen's eyes was problems with the internet, problem with connectivity.
And it's so interesting that a 6-year-old can convey that difficulty and those struggles.
Yes. And, even on adult level, I have to tell you this real story. So in September, I took a break from work and we had gotten our little Frenchie, and we have a big golden retriever, 90 pounds. But I took out our little Frenchie for a break. And the Frenchie, I got the line, we call it lunge line. It basically wrapped around my feet and I fell.
Oh, no.
So I ended up breaking my jaw, my left jaw, fractured 6 ribs, and had a complicated fracture in my left wrist.
Oh, my goodness.
So I had to go to the ER unit. So what was most distressing to me is our daughter came basically running home from college because she heard I was in the ER unit and had broken some things, and I couldn't hug her. So there I was, arm in a cast. My jaw was broken. That was terribly wrong. Just a lot of parts were broken from this fall, and I couldn't hug my daughter.
Oh.
And that just was, that was pandemic year in my opinion. That just kind of was, okay, this is what I'm a hugger and I can't do that. And she wants to hug me, and you can't have that, that affection.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's just struck everybody on different levels, but I think that when I think about neuromodeling and, when I broke my jaw, I saw the oral surgeon and she said, well, you didn't break both sides of your jaw, so we don't have to wire you shut. So I was really happy about that because I like to talk. And
good.
But she said your parts of your jaw will remodel over the year, and it's going to feel uncomfortable for a while. But come next September, we're going to take another MRI, and things are going to be shifting on the left part of your jaw. So, in science, we talk about neuroplasticity, right? In children's brains, I kind of equated that to, she used the word remodeling for the jaw. But, we look at the pandemic, and is that impacting a brain's growth with children? And I think this is a central thing we're all asking ourselves is, what is the degree? And it's, when you think of the pandemic, it's an adversive life event. And it's on so many levels. And I equate it to war zone. And it has threatened every level of our life. Our elderly, right? Parents, our young people in the world, Everybody's been affected. So we have to ask ourselves with neuroplasticity, what are the drivers? We know that the brain can change in response to stress. It can change in response to stimulation, like exercise, hearing music, right? And it can change in relation to growth. So, growth, stimulation, and stress. And as you know, we used to think of neuroplasticity years ago more to do with brain injury, strokes, and tumors. But now we're looking at the pandemic. How has this affected our children's brain?
Yeah. And I think it's really important because some people may not know what neuroplasticity is. So since you brought it up and I know we're going to talk about this, I'd love for you to kind of describe it to people who may not have heard that term before and may not know what it is. That would be helpful to kind of start there with what do we mean when we talk about neuroplasticity, and then go into neuroplasticity in the context of this COVID pandemic. And then maybe we can even move into what parents can do to support their children during this time.
Right. And so there are many synonyms for the word neuroplasticity. Some people refer this to as brain neuroplasticity. Other scientists refer to it as functional brain plasticity. Mm-hmm. And then I'm thinking of my jaw.
Absolutely.
I learned that remodeling term from my surgeon, my oral surgeon. I thought, oh, you're really, it's a different synonym for growth. And so what I mentioned is, neuroplasticity refers to our brains changing in response to growth, stimulation, and stress. All right. So we think of in our field, there is a wealth and breadth of research looking at adversity that children can face. Whether it's from verbal abuse, physical abuse, both. Their responses to horrible events like war, chronic trauma, even cyberbullying. So cyberbullying, in the form of sexual texting, things like that, that's an adverse of life event, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And it can be a driver. What are the drivers for neuroplasticity, neuroremodeling, my term. It's what are the drivers? And I think of the pandemic as being a driver for resiliency. And the thing is, what I've definitely have seen in the practice, and I'm sure you have, is some children are very resilient.
Absolutely.
They have adapted to the pandemic. They are not touched by sadness, depression. They have good life satisfaction. They're not stressed. They're able to settle down for sleep and sleep throughout the whole night. They're exercising. Their nutrition is great. I mean, these are the kids that are resilient, And what I've seen so far, and I think the literature really backs this up, is, well, let's ask ourselves, well, how can we help our children be more resilient? And I think that's the question that we as parents need to ask ourselves, right? How can we stimulate our child's brain? What do we need to do? Okay. And one of the things is, and it may seem common sense, but it's one thing to put this in action, is you have to create healthy habits and order, because this virus is not predictable.
We've learned that over the past year. Yes.
Right. And, we don't know what variants will be coming along in the next year. I mean, we don't know. So, but what we can do is have our homes be predictable. The virus is not predictable, but our homes can be. And we can create that structure and good, solid, healthy habits in our home. But in order to do that, you have to be consistent yourself.
Yes.
And a parent needs to identify when they are stressed, why they are stressed, and harness those coping skills. Because as you know, we're both moms, and our kids have little antennas on top of their head.
And they pick up on everything.
Everything. Right. It's like when Grace came to see me in the ER, she wasn't allowed in COVID. And I was smiling away and I had my hands. She said, "Mom, you're so happy." And I can't talk, right? "Oh no, I'll just be fine." "Mom, you look terrible." And she's sensitive, right? And these are children, so they may not let on sometimes, but they have these little antennas. So we as parents have to be ever so vigilant, in my humble opinion, more so than ever in the past, of practicing or doing what we preach.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we know from the literature that our stress levels dictate our kids' stress levels. They've done those studies where they measure adult stress, parent stress, and they find that the cortisol levels in their kids are high when parents are stressed. So we know that, like you're saying, one of the best ways to address some of the mental health needs of our children and to reduce their stress is to really keep our own stress levels under control.
Correct. And it's one thing to talk about it and it's one thing to do it, right?
Yes, absolutely. Two completely different things.
It's difficult.
Not always easy.
Right. And, that was always something we would tell parents and really try and do well ourselves as a neuropsychologist prior to the pandemic. But now with the pandemic, it's even become more important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Be consistent. And the other thing is, I think of what can parents do during this time to help that healthy brain continue on, And one of the things is routine needs to be established. And it's really hard for those parents that are working from home. And it's really hard for those parents who've lost their jobs. This is horrible. And it brings us on a whole nother level, where the parents serve as a mother, father, husband, wife. Now they're the teacher's aide with remote learning or what's coming up with hybrid learning, and in-person learning in some areas of the country is beginning like soon or is already in progress. But look at all these variables. So we really have to be vigilant and know that the children benefit from consistency and predictability. And we have to put a routine, we have to insert a routine in our homes, not only with sleep, social media, nutrition, but also with healthy work habits. And the kids look at their parents when they're working from home, if they still have their jobs.
Right.
They also look at if the parents lost their jobs or a job, how their parent is handling stress. And so this is so involved, right, on so many levels. But we know that habits are everything, order is everything. And we need to listen. Now, we always listen to our kids, right? We think we're listening, but we might be passive listeners. So we have to be more active in listening. What does that mean? Like, we really have to not think about our work or our own stress and be there at the moment with our child.
Absolutely. And all of these things that you're saying kind of support what you're saying about helping our kids build resilience. So you're talking about routine and predictability and self-monitoring for parents, their own stress levels, and actually being active in doing things that actually reduce stress levels. And then also paying attention to what you've described as exercise and sleep. And I'd love for you to expand on those two things because they're so important for cognitive functioning. They're so important for emotional regulation. I'm thinking about the 6-year-old who can't access learning because of internet issues and how that impacts you emotionally. And emotional regulation is such an important part of everything that we do, because if you're emotionally dysregulated, you can't access your thinking. But it seems like the two things that you mentioned, exercise and sleep, are so critical in our social, emotional, and our cognitive well-being.
Correct. And they are the bottom of the totem pole. We need to sleep and have nutrition and exercise for us to function every day. And again, I'm going back to parenting. The parents need to do this too.
Yes.
So, a teenager is going to look at their mom and dad, okay, say they're 15, and say their mom and dad are snacking and they've gained 15 pounds and they're not exercising, but that parent's telling their child exercise every day.
Right.
Okay. My question is, if I'm the teenage girl, I'm going to go, what? Are you crazy? Like, you're not doing it.
Right. That's where that modeling of behavior is so important, correct?
Correct. So, we have to do these things. Even if you still have your job and you're working 10 hours a day, daylight saving time's coming Sunday, we got to act on it. Now, what I found, and I'm sure you found this too, assessing children this winter, is it was particularly hard because of the darkness and the early onset of darkness. So that was another layer during the pandemic, because by the time school was done, in terms of Zoom or whatever remote learning platform the school was using, it was already dark. And the kids really couldn't go outside to exercise. So that was another layer that really, in my opinion, was prevalent in my cases last winter. And so I'm so excited. I'm so looking forward to Sunday.
Me too.
And this will just help our kids get more motivated when it's more light out, plus they'll get the light. They're going to get all these good vitamins from it. And I think it's really going to help them during the pandemic, because we're not out of the woods yet.
No, we're not. But, one of the things that you said, I think is really important, I don't want to rush by it, was about modeling the exercise. And you used the example of the teenager, the parent who sends their teenager to go do exercise while they are on Zoom or checking their email, whatever it is that they're doing. So the importance of modeling that behavior, that exercise, that good sleep. But I'm also tying it back to something you said earlier about, again, the loneliness of kids being away from their peers. It's also an opportunity if parents would go exercise with their kids. It's such a lovely opportunity to connect at a time when there's social distancing and people are separated, kids are separated from their friends. So it serves so many purposes to exercise with with family members, because again, you get that connection, you get the benefits of exercise, you decrease the loneliness. And you talked about the importance of listening to your kids. It provides an opportunity to do that while you're walking or you're hiking with your children. Right.
And I have to emphasize the listening part. There's passive listening and there's active listening. We have to practice. Well, we've practiced social distancing, right? We have to practice active listening. And that's really hard. It's something parents need to challenge themselves with every day. You can say it, but to really be there with your child and listen is it takes a lot of energy. And the reason why is you have to critically think about what your child is saying. And that's when you critically listen and be an active listener, that's when you're going to know if there's a problem or not in terms of mental health and learning. So our kids don't come up to us and say, Mom, this is what's going on. They won't say that. Or just say, a parent's working all day from home or from work, and then they have a half hour before dinner, right? And they decide that's the time that they're going to talk to their child. Well, that doesn't work either. So that's the parent's idea. That's from the parent lens. The child may not even want to talk. So what I found as a mom is it's the times when you don't expect them to say anything that they say something.
Right.
And that's where the active listening comes into play, and the active vigilance. So, you could be in the morning changing and your child decides to wander in your bedroom and they start talking, and you're busy getting ready for work or whatever you're doing. And your child is just saying these things like, oh, I'm just really tired on Zoom or something like that. They're feeding you information for you to respond to, and that creates the dialogue. But if you're running around and trying to get dressed and then, say to your child, oh, we'll talk about it later, you have missed that critical time in parenting when you could have made a difference in interpreting and listening and continuing that dialogue. And I want to mention is in that kind of circumstance, that's when that's where you build the resiliency and the anchoring of safety in the home. You're listening to your child. The dialogue continues. You're helping them problem solve, asking them questions, not fixing the problem necessarily, but helping them critically think through the problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in turn, it's reciprocal. They feel like they're being listened to. And man, you form an incredible role model when you do that. But to do that, you have to know that the opportunity is there. You have to put down your shoes and pants, right?
Right.
Sit on the bed and let it happen. So it's at the moment, and you got to practice this. Like I mentioned, we practice social distancing, but we have to practice active listening. It's really hard to do.
It is hard. It is hard, but it's so essential, particularly now when there's so much going on for our kids, for the adolescents, for kids. We really do. Like you said, we have to listen to what it is that they're telling us, because then we know how to support them and how to help them. Not only build resilience, but also if there are social and emotional challenges, if there is depression or there is anxiety, then we can seek out support for them. But we won't know that there's a need to seek out the support if we don't actively listen to what it is that they're saying to us.
Correct. And I want to mention one other thing I think is essential before we leave each other today. The last point is children are on social media and they're listening to the news. They need help in interpreting what they're hearing. Okay? And I think this is so important. We really didn't think about that. I certainly didn't as a parent before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Many things were happening for many years, but it just took on a different, a different level of importance when the pandemic occurred and is occurring. Is these kids have access to things we never did when we were kids. And it is what they're hearing can be really scary, and it can be really interesting, and it can be fun. But the other part of listening is being aware of how your child is encoding that information they're getting from the internet. Are they understanding it? Because this is high level stuff that's happening, and it's really scary. So we have to identify their emotions and actively listen to the warning signs of sadness and anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. Help them talk about it, help them process the information. And it's important not to ignore this, okay, in your child. And again, I'm back to taking the time. And it's difficult. You have to practice that active listening. And it's better said than done. I think that's one of the hardest things to do as a parent, is to be an active listener.
But it's definitely something that we can learn. And I think that what you've done is you've beautifully highlighted that, family environment and the lifestyle of the family is so important in supporting the emotional functioning of our kids. And that there are things that we can do as parents to build resilience and to help kids cope with difficult circumstances like we are in right now. And it begins, like you're saying, with active listening. And then once you are engaging in that active listening, then you can help with help kids develop those problem-solving skills, and you can help them engage in the critical thinking and help them process what it is that they're hearing, either on the news or from friends over Zoom. So all of this is incredibly important to support just their overall well-being, because ultimately what we want are healthy young people. We want them to be emotionally healthy. We want them to be cognitively healthy. And all of these things that you've outlined support brain health, which also support your emotional health, because they're connected.
Right. And the other point I think, Karen, is we need to listen without blaming judgment.
Mm-hmm.
We're not the critiquers as parents. We need to be the active listener and have no judgment. And the parents who do that, the dialogue will be enhanced. I guarantee it. And the other thing is, be alert to signs and symptoms, be alert to problems sleeping at night, or, your child taking 2 hours to settle down at night, or being exposed to unhealthy things on the internet. We have to decode all this information for our children because their brain is still developing. They don't have the coping skills we do as adults.
Right. And I think that for parents, there's a lot that they have to kind of pay attention to, particularly now. And when they're hearing things from their children, they may not feel like they are capable of addressing the needs of their children. I think that that's important, because then they have an opportunity to reach out for help. But again, if you're not actively listening for the anxiety, for the depression, for the loneliness, for the frustration with remote learning, then you won't know how to support them. And I think it's important to know that there are resources available and people that they can reach out to, community members and educators that can help them get the support that they need so that they can better support their family. Yeah,
absolutely. And if you think something's not quite right, you're the best judge of that as a parent. Do something about it. If the dialogue isn't helping the situation and you feel lost and confused, then it's time to seek out a professional.
Absolutely.
And they'll help, and they will help you.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Schiltz, I have really appreciated this discussion. I think, again, you've just really helped a lot of families understand that there are things that they can do, particularly at a time when we feel like we don't have control over what is happening in our environment. We can't control the virus. We can't control whether or not things are going to be shut down. And you've given parents and families an opportunity to kind of look at themselves, look at their family systems, and realize that there are things that they can do now, even in the midst of a pandemic, to support their family as we kind of navigate these uncharted waters and hopefully approach that light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes. And, we're all in it together.
Yes, we are. Thank you again. And I appreciate this discussion. Thank you so much. And I know that people might want to reach out to you to know more for a consultation or maybe for an evaluation for their child. What is the best way for people to get in touch with you or connect with you?
Well, our office number is 805-379-4939. Golden State Neuropsychology is in Calabasas, California.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Schiltz. And I hope to have you back because there's so much more we can talk about.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you so much for listening. It would be an absolute gift if you would rate this podcast and leave a review. It actually helps other people find this podcast. So if you found it helpful, my one ask for you today would be to please leave a rating and a review. Have a beautiful week. Get outdoors, spend time with the people that you love, and take a break from the screens. We will have more on that next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.